video for the next 90 minutes or so. So the whole intent for the session is really to help you be confident in your tools. So if I'm moving too fast, if there's something that I'm not clear on, please just put your hand up and happy to take questions as you go, or feel free to save it until the end. But we would collectively like you to leave this room this afternoon knowing a little bit more about the market than you did when you came, recognising the commitment you've made to be here today. So ultimately, this is about helping you succeed. It's about giving you the tools to better understand the market. And whilst many of you will be exporting to other markets internationally, I don't think Australia is any more complex, but I think it's slightly different. Helping you identify an opportunity to win, what you need to look for, what you need to consider, and ultimately how do you need to engage with your target buyer to be successful. And then in a market such as Australia, where there's so many similarities with other countries in the world, yet such a diverse culture for food, how can you execute with excellence to win? Because it's very competitive. You know, you're here today representing exciting Japanese food and drink businesses, but your competition will be doing similar things at different times of the year around different trade shows. Because so many countries now want to supply Australia. So very briefly, a little bit about me. I did 20 years international food manufacturing based in the UK, supplying some of the largest retailers and the likes of McDonald's and KFC, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In 2011, I was headhunted to come out and be part of the Coles supermarket transformation. And I say transformation, and it's not a word I use lightly. When I arrived, we were a significant retailer, but our practices weren't great. Our focus on the consumer was poor at best. And there was lots of operational efficiencies we need to improve to put the customer first. So I did nearly 10 years for Coles working across their private label team, managing a team of around 120 with development chefs and product developers, launching around 1,200 new products a year, and growing the business from a $7 billion brand into a $9 billion brand, which is actually 4 times the size of David Jones today. The single biggest thing I'm most proud of during my time at Coles is how we changed from eating a product in a restaurant tonight and thinking that must be great, let's develop it under private label and Australian consumers will buy it, to actually getting the team to think differently around what problem do Australian consumers have and how do we develop products, whether they're food or non-food, that meet that need. And ultimately it's about finding a problem and delivering a solution. And I still believe today, as you look in with your products, it's about identifying what is that customer problem and how can I make their life easier, and building that into your narrative for success. So when Wesfarmers sold us back onto the Australian Stock Exchange in 2019, myself and some colleagues launched Prof Consulting. We're a team of 35 food experts that are consulting from grocery all the way down through to entrepreneur food and drink businesses. 2 years ago, as I said, I moved the business back up into the UK, and we have a team in key international markets. So I've got 10 people in Australia, and I've also got colleagues in other international markets. What that does give us is a bigger perspective of what's happening internationally, because Australia is fantastic, but it's a long way away from other things and other places. So the ability to see what other retailers are launching quickly and talk to clients here about where consumer trends are going, ultimately I think helps contribute to you having the right understanding of who your customer is here, where the market's going, and gives you a tool to win. So super excited today, as I say, to be talking to you. So let's have a quick look at the economic overview, because I think it's really important to understand the economic landscape. So Australia at a glance. Population is now over 27 million. I think when I came out the figure was less than 25 million. So it's a significant population, but it's in a country 2.5 times the size of Europe. So on one hand that's really positive, on the other hand there are bigger markets that you can go and get more success very quickly. The UK is an example, 75 million people, a country the size of Victoria. But you have to remember the proximity here to Japan and the cultural acceptances that make your products really targeted towards these consumers, which I think gives you an advantage in this market. But also from an Australian perspective, almost 1/3 of the population were born overseas. So that means we're a very diverse culture. And you bring that back into food, it means that the rules that we grew up with in our own countries around what food would we eat, when would we eat it, what would we pair with that food. In Australia, those rules are really fluid, which I think gives us a higher level of creativity. And I think we see that Asian fusion coming through into food, which again, really inspires the consumer, and it gives us more opportunities. Average age for the country, 38.5 years old. That seems a lifetime ago for some of us. Yeah, but 38 and a half years old. But what we are seeing is that 65, that older community is living longer now. And that's really important because in the market, they're not currently being looked after in the way in which they need. So we've seen things such as the Royal Commission looking at how do we feed our elderly population, how do we feed them in aged care facilities and so forth. Their nutritional needs are becoming more important in how we develop food, and we're seeing brands being very successful tailoring products just into that institution aged care sector because of the way in which it's grown and the lack of competition in that space. So the first thing I'd like to just frame there as we get into this early slide, that success for you today isn't necessarily going out saying I need to supply Coles or Woolworths. For some of you supplying into that aged care sector, that might be success. So it's about understanding what are the opportunities in the market, because it might be not just limited to one retailer. Average wage in Australia, 75,000, and about 90% of the workers in casual employment. So what that does mean is a number of Australians are still thinking ahead to, will I still be working next week? How much will I be earning next month? Because of that high reliance on the casual employment sector. A little bit different to some other markets. But the other piece of data that I think is really exciting is for a country that's as vast as we've talked about already, 90% of the population live in the urban areas. So if you break it down, Eastern Seaboard, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, yeah, you can have great success just on this side of the country. Perth in WA, absolutely fantastic, but in my experience, sending product from here to there is at least 3 days by rail, which comes at a significant cost. So as you're looking in, it doesn't necessarily need to be full domestic domination. You can tailor it and go, I think as I heard earlier today, 35,000 Japanese people live around New South Wales, 104,000 in the country. So if you want to target just a Japanese proportion, you can do that very focused. But I would suggest that where we're seeing food go, and we'll talk about it more in the slides, it's not about targeting just the Japanese consumer, it's about targeting the Australian consumers in the area where it's most dense. So just to continue on the economic theme, inflation, so we're seeing CPI slow in the market, which is really important. Yeah, down from a 7.8 in 2023 to 3.8 by December 2025, which means it's beginning to ease some of the cost of pressure that consumers are facing. Interest rates, so I came out with this quite positive, and then I see the announcement this week, not looking quite so good with the interest rate increase we've seen. But overall, interest rates have come down from where they were, albeit recognising that they talked about the increase this week. So from a consumer sentiment perspective, in my view, it's always slightly better in the summer because we're not... Louder. Yeah, excellent, thank you. We're always slightly happier in the summer because we haven't got necessarily the heating and energy bills that we would see in the winter. So I think we're coming out of a phase where consumers are enjoying the sun and enjoying life more. But I think the economic pressures are better than they were this time last year, so that's positive. But I think it's also opened up some very interesting dynamics that we'll get into shortly. So the workforce dynamics, 2.7 million people, that's at 19% we've touched on, in casual employment. So not sure where they will be next week. You know, very high risk, I would say, in where they spend their money, and very focused, so a very hard audience to serve. 37% of employed Australians are regularly working from home. Now this is down from 40%, but we say, why is that important where they work? If you're working from home, think about what you've had for dinner today or what you had for breakfast yesterday. Because when you're in the office, I guarantee for most of you it's different. Your shopping habit is different. And what we are seeing in the market now is something that you can cook very quickly at home because you don't want to do all the preparation, you've only got the half an hour because you're not going to the cafe or you're not going to the restaurant outside your factory. And that's creating opportunities, particularly in things like the ambient microwavable meals. We're seeing lots of growth in that, and that's really going after the fresh food space at the moment. So the fact that so many consumers are still balancing remote work and homework, I think creates a real opportunity that some brands are leaning into really well. And as I said, that hybrid working continues to reshape shopping habits. And if you're working from home, then maybe tonight's dinner you don't mind spending a bit more time on preparation. If you're in the city, finish at 6, don't get in till 7, you want something that's light and easy, really quick to produce. So it's understanding your target customer, what's their work pattern, and how do you create products or bring brands to market that meet that need. So we've talked about the economics. Let's move on a little bit now to the Australian consumer. So a modern consumer in Australia, multicultural and diverse. I think that rigidity of rules is very loose in Australia, which I think is super exciting. We're a lot more adventurous. We're a lot more willing to try different things, and we're looking for authentic global cuisines to go alongside traditional favourites. And I think that's really important. If you look at things like Mexican, just as a very quick example, Tex-Mex, most Australians love it, yeah? But they also love the authentic Mexican food where you get that real heat, you get that real spice, you get the vibrance of colour. And I think you bring that conversation into this conversation about Japanese food. I think they like the Australian version of a stir fry and, the very simple type products, but they can't beat that really authentic Japanese product there that we're seeing so much of around the major cities. So that authenticity, I think, is a big part of your card to win in this market. Health and lifestyle focus. We're seeing the growing demand for high protein. There isn't many products now, or many categories, that haven't got a high protein version of the traditional version. Australians really understand high protein. What we are now beginning to see is that move into high protein and high fibre. And I think the Australian market is a little bit behind what we're seeing in the US and the UK at the minute for those people that are on the GLP weight loss type diets. And we're really seeing that change how people look at food, and we're really seeing that change the type of foods that people will buy. Confectionery is definitely dropping overseas, because people on that weight management program, it's really changing their mindset, at least while they're on that drug. So we're a little bit behind here from a food perspective in that stage, but the access to the weight loss drug here is some of the highest it is in the world. So I expect that to change very quickly, and I expect that to create an opportunity for those businesses operating in that space. High protein, high fibre, reduced sugar, great tasting products. And sustainability continues to be important. Although I would agree, in many cases, consumers are reluctant to pay more for a sustainable food product versus a traditional food product. Social media, Save, the influence of social media now across food is incredible, and that's a great opportunity. We're seeing some fantastic products now that start off on social media and they suddenly become the next trend. Sometimes the bubble bursts very quickly, sometimes it helps people understand it and it builds longevity. So I think it's understanding what's the role of social media in that market. And as you get in front of a retailer and they offer you their retail media catalogue saying, where would you like to spend your money to help your customers find our brands? Yeah, social media is obviously a key part of that. For those of you who read the local press yesterday, CEO of Coles was talking about 3 to 5 years' time, consumers will get food delivered via an AI interaction. They won't even know where the food has come from. They will just know that my diet for this week means I need this type of food, this type of meals, and I don't care which retailer it's come from. So the market dynamics are changing, and as retailers embrace AI, I think it's important to understand how AI influences your opportunity. Even down to the search engine, somebody puts in a high protein product, cured meal, you want to be coming up quick there with the credibility behind it. But the world's changing at pace, and it's important to understand and monitor that. But for all those good things, price and quality consciousness still remains to be key in the market, balancing responsible sourcing commitments, as I said, against true value and price sensitivity. 3 meals a day is no longer the norm. Yeah, that 4th meal with a healthy snacking option is really becoming a key part of most of our lifestyles. I'm old enough to remember that snack used to be a cheat between lunchtime and dinner. Yeah, actually now it's something to see you through to the early evening when you get together as a family. And as such, we're seeing some great innovation in that space that isn't necessarily giving you the traditional sugar hit. It might give you some added nutrients for functionality. It might give you added protein to see you through. Yeah, but it's a benefit as opposed to a cheat. And I think that's a real change in the market now. So changing consumer dynamics, shifting behaviour. So this is a term that I'm borrowing from a colleague, but trading down to trade up simultaneously across categories. It sounds great. What does it really mean? In reality, many of us are eating out at restaurants a lot less, so we're trading down. We're going around the supermarkets and we're buying a more premium product because we're trading up, and ultimately we're saving money at the end of the week. So you look at things such as your bag of coffee roast beans as an example. People are spending $60 on a bag of roast beans now, whereas 10 years ago they wouldn't spend 20. But you break that bag of beans down and it's saving you money versus a $7 cup of coffee you're buying on your way into work every day. The same with premium meats, the same with better quality breads, the same with better quality alcohol offers. So what we are seeing is, the food service trade finding it tough, understandably, but actually what that means is from a retail perspective, consumers are spending more, even on things such as health and beauty. If it makes that duration between the hair appointments stretch out even further, you're helping the consumer save money. So from a buyer's perspective, I'm now looking for more products that help me deliver that trade down to trade up mentality than I was previously. So if you've got something that's more expensive, your chances of getting success in retail now, I believe, is stronger than it would have been 2 or 3 years ago, because the mentality's changed. Reduced food waste continues to become a household priority, so it isn't about size of meal, and it isn't about the preparation of meal and having things left over. It's about tailoring that to that meal occasion, and I think consumers are becoming increasingly focused on that. Talking to a client very recently, and they use the example with me. If you look at the population that live in the small apartments, they don't want a 24 pack of toilet roll or 24 slab of water because they haven't got room for it. That's why we're seeing the growth of mini melons, mini cucumbers, the things that you can just eat for that one meal occasion, and then the consumer can get rid of the waste, hopefully in a sustainable manner, but they're not worried about, well, I need to keep all this stuff in the fridge for the weekend. You're not shopping for the week anymore. And I think understanding how that's influencing your opportunity is key. But also we're seeing the growth in the subscription model here, where the consumer still has a similar amount of weekly money to spend on their shopping. But I believe if you break that purse down and say, where's it going now versus where was it going 10 years ago, we're seeing more go into Uber Eats, we're seeing more go into the subscription model, and ultimately we're seeing that impact what's being spent in retail. So it's becoming more competitive for sure. And the growth of the rapid delivery service. Each of the retailers here now have partnered with somebody, whether it's Uber Eats or others. Some of them are partnered with different people to try and be disruptive in the market. But what it does mean is, as a consumer, you can get food on demand wherever you want now. And I think that's really exciting. And then just to touch briefly on retail and digital trends, sustained growth in retailers' own brand products, delivering premiumisation, so the trade down to trade up concept has been really good for the retailers here. But the retailers remain incredibly focused on own brand products that carry their name. But I think that also creates an opportunity for some of you as well, which we will explore a bit later. That authenticity continues to be a trend coming through. We've moved away in many cases from the traditional high sugar tomato sauces, barbecue sauce and so forth. And we're looking for things now that have got great flavour and clean ingredients, and that's coming through into food. You just need to look at the growth of products that have got hot honey at the moment as an example. That's something that wouldn't have been anywhere near as mainstream a few years ago. AI and personal shopping experiences, we've touched on that, but I think that's going to transform the Australian market in the next 2 to 5 years for sure, and 2 to 5 years might be too long, and nearly daily shopping visits, just in the city here again this week, and it reinforces that the Australian consumer loves to shop after work or loves to shop lunchtime. People aren't using the trolleys anywhere near as much as they used to. It's not the weekly or even the fortnightly shop, it's that regular shop. What shall I get for tonight? And what shall I have for maybe tomorrow? And I think that's stretching it in many cases because of that perception of fresh, that perception of convenience, and also the social element. So complexities of scale. We've touched on the size of Australia. We've talked about 75% of the population here on the eastern seaboard, and we've talked about the challenges of getting product by rail freight across the country. So the piece I would just like to touch on is when you're looking from a biosecurity perspective, yes, Australia has some particular requirements that are almost unique to Australia and New Zealand, considering they're governed by the same legislative framework. But there are some challenges to consider as you move product from state to state. As an example, you can't take Tasmanian seafood back into Tasmania if you bring it to Victoria to process it. If you want to move honey across the country, it's very hard to take honey into South Australia or WA. You can't take bananas into WA. Now, whilst you're not looking to sell bananas today, I think that the message there is you're looking at a macro level to what can I export into Australia, and then if you want to go for nationwide supply, you've got to understand at the state level whether you're free to move your products through there, or if there's an intervention that needs to be done to make sure you can move the products in. Just getting your products into Sydney doesn't give you access to the whole country. National geographical challenges we've talked about, the heat going across South Australia into Perth is intense. Some people are handling that through product formulation, but it's definitely something to consider. This market is very different. If you wanted to bring aerosols into the country as an example, very challenging because of the risk of explosion at a commercial level. So it's about understanding for your product category what risks you need to be aware of, so you don't get excited, drop a container of product into Australia and then get the phone call that says, hey, we've got a problem. And in the most popular states, as we've talked about, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, we can have a lot of success in that side of or this side of the country, I should say. But also we shouldn't forget that we've got more billionaires in Perth than we have in Australia. Yeah, so it's that balance, but it isn't. It's not all equal, would be my message. So just to move on a bit now, so we get into retail and grocery. So 143 billion is the total market size, for the retail operation in here. And it's one of the most concentrated retail environments in the world. So what do we mean? Really, you've only got a small group of retailers, or we've only got a small group of retailers. What we have seen lately is a narrative change. So we now talk about the big four owning 80% of the market, whereas not too long ago it's the big two with 65% of the market. The exciting thing is, I think that gives you choice. I would always say to any client that engages us to look at new market access, not all retailers are the same. There's some that will fit better for your products, and there's some that won't be a good fit for your products. So here you really, if you're looking at a retail strategy, you've only really got to consider for all the independent sector. So I think that helps you really target in where you are, yeah? Big four, Woolworths, Coles, Aldi and Costco, as we say, 80% of the grocery sales in the market. The independent sector, if you've been around Sydney, you look at the likes of Harris Farms, those type of operators, combined they're about 20% of the market. I think they're a fascinating part of the market because I think that's where the foodies tend to shop. So in many cases, if you're bringing a new exciting product to the market, somebody like a Harris Farms customer is quite likely to be less price sensitive, looking for the next thing from a health perspective or cuisine perspective, and it's a good position to get your product in and start building brand awareness before you get invited into Coles and Woolworths because they see you're doing something really good in the market. That said, there are complexities about supplying the independents. Some of it will go through our largest wholesaler, which is Metcash. Some of it will be a direct-to-store model, but it's as you unpick it and say, where do I want my product? How do I build a supply chain or local partnerships that enable me to service that account properly? Yeah? The key message there, though, is success in Coles might get you the volume, it might not get you the long-term price position that you need in the market, whereas going into the independent sector, growing a little bit slower, yeah, can help you establish a price before you go in. Online growth. Online growth in Australia for food and drink is double-digit growth for the third year in a row. So consumers are absolutely tapping into how do I buy it, where do I buy it, when do I get it delivered, and where do I get it delivered. So that's an important part of that, and I think that's a consideration as you look at the market for which retailer do you want to go with and who's got the best online platform that suits where you want your product to be positioned. And then store formats. Store formats are changing at pace. We're seeing less of the large format stores that used to walk in and nearly needed a trolley to get yourself round. We're seeing a lot more smaller footprints now, some very highly invested stores, but really focused on convenience. And ultimately these stores are located closer to where the consumers are because it aids that online delivery method that we've talked about. We have seen the withdrawal of in-store theatre around butchers, delis, fishmongers as an example, partly driven to wastage, partly driven by access to skilled labour and labour costs. But what we are seeing is the retailers continue to invest in the bakery sector and trying to win from that bakery perspective. We've seen sustainability drive initiatives around loose or bulk selling. I think probably the model that's working best here seems to be confectionery across the retailers, where you go in with a scoop and you do your bag. Pet treats seems to be working reasonably well in those stores that have got it, but probably nuts and healthy snacking is probably the leader in that space. I think from the data we're seeing, that's not going to grow much more. I don't think we'll see it go big time into detergents, big time into olive oils and coffee and those type of things. But I think the retailers feel it's important to have an offer, but I don't think it's a key strategic growth for them to deliver sustainability in packaging. Yeah, labour costs we've touched on. You know, labour is incredibly expensive, as we all know, in Australia, so they're less likely to want to do in-store activity to support brands because of the cost behind it. And in some cases, when you go to pitch to a retailer, whether you're going independent or into the majors, having access to a field team or a sales team that makes sure your product on shelf is a key consideration. So it really is down to understanding, you know, not just the price and the margin aspirations, but can I sit back and be confident that my product's going to get on the shelves when I get a listing? Because ultimately that's going to determine how long your product's on the shelf. And the piece that's really exciting at the minute, particularly when you look at some of the changes around online platforms, such as Ocado, is that both the major retailers have now invested significantly in efficiency and automation in their distribution centres. And we go, okay, what does that really mean? Well, if we go back to Coles' latest round of reports, they've got more product through their distribution centre month on month than they've ever got through. So if I want to supply Coles, I've got confidence they can get the product through the DC quicker into the stores and meet that customer demand. Because ultimately, if I'm sat where you are, I want someone that can get my product through the supply chain quickly and get it where customers can buy it. So I think that's really important, as opposed to, you know, where they have been prior to their investments, really struggling to get product from supplier through distribution centres, poor availability in store. As a brand owner, you want to know your products on the shelf and you want it to be loud and proud in front of customers to the standard that you want. So I think that's really important, that we've seen them build the engine, and that engine has still got lots of capacity. So we just get now into some retailers for some detail. So Woolworths, largest retailer in the market, about 37% market share. Yeah, over 1,000 supermarkets, traditional size, and over 100 Metro stores, which is the smaller format. Grab something for now, maybe something for this evening, but not really a big shop, limited range. Their food sales exceeds $50 billion. $50 billion. Okay. Their strategic priority is about own brand penetration, so they want to grow own brand. And the reason they want to grow own brand is if you've got fantastic own brand products, by nature you can only buy it in that store. So I've got a great Woolworths product, you can only buy it in a Woolworths store. You love it, you come in to buy it in the Woolworths store, and while you're buying that product, you'll buy the brands that you need at the same time, which takes some of the pressure off pricing for the brands, because it isn't just a price game. But what it does mean is if you've got a strong private label offer or own brand offer, as we term it now, you've got more chance to attract the customer in, and while they're in there, they will buy both lots of product. We always used to say that in a retail environment, the brands were my neighbour's children, and I wanted my neighbour's kids to do well. Own brand was my kids. I'm a little bit competitive. I wanted my kids to do even better. The message is in the supermarket environment, for it to work, you've got to have both doing well, as opposed to private label at the expense of brands. So Woolworths very committed to a food-first customer experience. So in many cases, going back to the basics, trying to improve quality, improve availability, and make sure there's a right portfolio of products now that customers want. Both retailers, just Coles and Woolworths there, have got their ability to cluster, which means that as you bring a product into Australia, your product might be quite premium and is suited for the top 300 Woolworths stores, as an example. Whereas prior to them having the clustering facility, you were expected to perform in all stores. Now your product's probably not going to perform very well in the mines up in WA, but your measure around success in units per store per week will include that. So the fact that they can cluster and say you need to be in Bondi, you need to be in Darling Harbour and so forth, is putting you in the more affluent areas where you've got greater chance of success. So I think that's really positive for you, because you can win on a smaller market share with those customers that really want your product, as opposed to trying to win in all of Australia where maybe customers just don't understand the product. Digital experience and supply chain efficiencies, we've touched on that, but it's very clearly part of the retailer's strategy here, and it's changing at pace. But they're also the owner of the largest food service distributor in Australia, and what we are seeing now is some synergies between, if you go into the retailer, you can get access into their wholesale catalogue. So that's a point of difference with them, and they're looking for great products. They're looking for reasons to win in the wholesale or the food service sector. And for some of you, that will be really interesting. And I'm sure you're aware that PFD also have some of their own processing facilities. So in some cases, there's an opportunity to supply great ingredients or condiments in, if it aligns with some of the products that they're producing. And interestingly, they're also the major owner of Petstock. So Petstock, premium pet food retailer in this market, the big box format, for those of you that are interested in pet care. The data says that when the consumer shops in the supermarket, you're focused on spending your weekly budget, and it's going to be X. When you go into the Petstock, it's a bit like going into Bunnings. It's a different shop, a different experience, so it doesn't really count. So consumers will spend more on premium pet care, outside of a traditional supermarket, than they will when they're inside. And that's why the Petstock and Pet Bar model is working so well here. And as a pet owner, I can absolutely relate to it. It's two different pockets. But that's a high growth opportunity here. And you look at the apartments and you look at the type of products that people are looking for, that market is only going to continue to grow. So let's come into Coles, number 2 then. So about 27% market share, about 840 supermarkets, and only 40 Coles local. They are taking it a lot slower with the Coles local model. I was in the store in North Sydney yesterday and thought it was fantastic. So they're trying to make their stores a bit more of a community store than I would say the Woolworths Metro version is. But as I say, they've got lesser stores in there. Supermarket sales around $39 billion, so obviously significant. But Coles have also still got their bottle shop format, so they're off licenses, as we might call it, with over 1,000 alcohol stores. They've just rebranded everything together, which makes it simpler for customers, but I think really exciting, it makes it simpler for suppliers as well. There's only one banner to focus on now. and their sales are generating over $2 billion in that space. So, you know, they are having some challenges in alcohol, driven by people drinking less and drinking differently. But 1,000 stores, if you're looking to bring alcohol into the Australian market, that's a good place for a conversation, I would suggest. So strategic priorities: premium own brand penetration. They operate under what we call the Coles Finest, and you're seeing more and more product of that. And as you see through their company reports or their trading statements, a lot of their innovation is going into that space. And as we said a few minutes ago, trading down to trade up, so that really fits into it. So you can hear, here's the strategy, how am I seeing it executed in store, and hopefully that starts to tie it together. But it's also a value-led proposition. How do we make sure we're driving value for those customers that really need it? So we're seeing more innovation and more products moving into their value brand, simply. And then simplifying and invest programs. So they're trying to make things simpler in store. So in some cases, taking the deli out, it seems making things simpler. But simplicity at a store level is really important, because they're trying to take as much cost out as they can to be able to invest in price. In this market, retailers and brand owners are continuing to invest significantly in price. E-commerce we've touched on, a key part of their strategy. The difference with Coles, if you've got a product that you think e-commerce is really important for, is that Coles are now picking their products from their large automated distribution centres, whereas Woolworths are predominantly picking their product from store. So it's a different store experience, it's a different operating model. And as you look in and go, okay, where can I be most successful? For some of you, that might be a consideration. And sustainability commitments are embedded in their trading strategy. So they're delivering some really good commitments around sustainability at the moment. And I would say both of the two major retailers are vying to be Australia's most sustainable retailer. Now overseas, we are seeing people pull back from commitments because they're realising the political landscape has changed and it's too hard to achieve. At the minute, I think we're still seeing good pace in this space. But if you've got a brand and a story that aligns with the retailer's strategy, and you're doing something fantastic around food waste or sustainability or innovation in packaging, it's another reason for you to be on the shelf, as opposed to the supplier that came in before you and the two that's coming in after you. So it's I always say, it's how do you identify the key things from the strategy and say, how do I pull that back into my product, and is there something I can help that category manager deliver his or her objective by? So into Aldi. Aldi now, over 600 stores, nationwide distribution. Supermarket sales in excess of 13 billion, which is still significant, but obviously a lot less than the two we've talked about. And 90% of their portfolio is own brand. So if you're looking to supply into them, it's more complex, because you've probably got two routes in. One is to be an own brand supplier and contract manufacturer for them, or the other is to look at their special offers that go down the centre of the store, really big volume for 2 weeks, and then you're out until the next calendar. For some people that's a great route in, for others it's not the long-term strategy that they're looking for, but a significant player in the market and a real influencer on what the price of stuff is in the market. Aldi will continue to be the cheapest here. The difference will be how close to an Aldi price a similar Coles product or a similar Woolworths product will be. But Aldi will continue to show price leadership in this market for sure, And they're continuing to expand at pace, which I think is really interesting, because it puts a pressure on the rest of the retail sector. As Aldi go after their greatest share of that 143 billion, it makes the others continue to focus on executing their strategy. That said, this morning's headline, and it's always difficult when you write a presentation a week ago, This morning's headline was Coles and Woolworths took good market share from Aldi over Christmas. So, it would be really interesting as we go into the colder climate to see whether that was just a Christmas and I want to trade up and treat my family with better stuff, and Aldi's portfolio didn't have the offer that I needed, or whether that's beginning to be a step change that the other retailers have put pressure on Aldi and Aldi's market share starts to decline. Distribution centres, we've talked about there as well, People would say to me that Aldi is the easiest one to supply once you're in, because it's just trading is a lot easier, less complexity within the supply base, but it's getting in as a challenge because it's an own brand game. And then Costco. Costco, one of my favourite retailers, could lose myself in there quite easily, but 6% market share. They had a very aggressive growth strategy for 2025, which they've delivered, and they've just gone again recently with a growth strategy for 2030. They see this as a key growth market for them. They've got over 20 warehouse format stores at the moment, so a lot easier to get product in. Pallet in, pallet out is generally the language that they talk about. They've got some of the best in-market sampling that I've seen anywhere. So if you've got a new product in there, if you use their sampling program, I think it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can almost have dinner, walk in the store, but you can get customers to try your product. And we know if people try a great product, they buy it because they just enjoyed it, as opposed to seeing it on the shelf and go, well, maybe I'll try it next time. Yeah. So if you're introducing products into the market, a Costco strategy can be really good for you under a branded. They're doing about $7 billion in the market, including alcohol, which is not insignificant. And they've got a direct-to-store distribution model in many cases. So, again, it's pallet in, pallet out, easier to supply, takes a bit of complexity out as well. So, that might be attractive for some of you. Strategic priorities. So own brand for them is still a part of their priority. Kirkland would be some of the best performing private label products in the market and set a good quality standard, but it's a lot smaller range than you'd see across other retailers. And my understanding there is if you want to supply private label into Costco, you've got to go in through the US most of the time, so probably a bit complex. But if you want to get great tasting food or drink products into Costco, then you absolutely trade locally. You trade locally, yeah, in many cases, once you're on the list, it opens your opportunity for the next country, or vice versa. If you're already supplying in Japan, you've probably got a warm lead to come into Australia. So, again, a different model just gives you a bit of options, which I think is important. In-store sampling, we've talked about. In-store theatre, they just want to get you in there and make it exciting. So if you go in there at Halloween, you'd wonder where you are. You go in there at Christmas, it's just different, and you can lose yourself in there. And I think the average spend in there is something like $400. Yeah, so you're going in there, you're going to spend, you might not be back in for a couple of weeks, but it's a different mindset when you go into those stores, which is super exciting. And they've also now got, in Australia only, they've also got an online platform. So now you can order products online from Costco and you don't need the membership card, which I think just shows that they're doing things differently in this market and making products more accessible to customers. So it gives you access, if you're supplying Costco, to a different consumer than you would have had before that announcement. It's no longer, the mum and dad with the shop and they're using that for food service, or the family that want to buy bulk. So again, makes it more exciting, I think. Then the independent sector. I always say the independent sector for me is very much like the farm shop in the UK. You go there because you want a different experience. Yes, we've got some that are challenged, but we've also got some that I would say right up there against some of the best in the world. And just as a couple of examples, we've got Harris Farms, 52 or 54 shops here in Sydney, just done the deal with Amazon now for online delivery of fresh food, which is super exciting and definitely one to watch moving forward. But a fantastic retail experience in their store. You go in there because of the whole food experience. I can see from some of you, you're very familiar with Harris Farms. I probably don't need to say much more, but a great place where your product could sit, bearing in mind your reputation for quality, provenance, and great taste and so forth. If you go down to Victoria, you've got Richie's. He's got like 34 stores. Again, fantastic experience, very comparable to Harris Farms. And then you've got Drake's in South Australia and now Queensland, who's got something like 190 stores. But again, great shopping experiences. And in some cases you can go direct, in some cases you can go through a local distributor, or you can go through the Metcash model. So we break that down break that down a little bit. So they're famous for fresh, the centre of store. Yeah, so they're looking to get more of the share of basket now for the ambient products or even the frozen products, because that's where they haven't traditionally been strong. That, in my mind, creates an opportunity for you. As we said, sometimes you can do the direct supply model depending. If not, you can go through the Metcash wholesale model. If you're going for a Metcash model, it comes with a cost, but it comes with an advantage. You've got to understand whether that makes sense for you. I think, though, on some of those, if you go into that channel, having a field or sales team is really important, because you risk getting listed into the catalogue, and if the store manager doesn't know your product, hasn't tried it, isn't familiar with it, thinks it's too hard, he's not getting it down to a store level, you're not going to get the sales that you want. So you've got to look in at it and say, if I go into the independent sector, how does it differ? How do I build my supply chain? And how do I set my brand up for success? Because, as we said right at the beginning, 4 retailers, but they're not all the same. So I just wanted to share this. This is from the ABS data from last year to give you an idea on where the food trends are across categories. So obviously government statistics coming through. What we are seeing over the last 5 years trend is that alcoholic beverages are starting to increase per gram per person, nearly up by 30 grams in that time frame, which is positive. But I think that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. Milk products, slight decline in milk. Yeah, I think that's probably driven by the access to the UHT plant-based milks that we're seeing now and how that market has changed. So it's not necessarily vegan or vegetarian, it's the influence on that barista and the coffee. So I think there's other factors in there, but milk products taking a bit of a decline. Vegetable products here continues to be a challenge for the market. We know Australians are not eating enough fresh veg, and there's some key initiatives there at the moment. Why that's important to this conversation is if you're looking to bring products into the UK, into Australia, frozen products, processed products that have got a high veg content are generally easier to import into the country. And there is a push now on how you have great tasting food that might be produce, or it might be meat, or it might be a combination, rather than where we were probably 12 or 18 months ago, that anything that was vegetable based was seen as being vegan or vegetarian. I think, talking that flexitarian narrative now is opening up a bigger market for those of you that have got products with a high content of veg. Meat and poultry products continues to increase, no real surprise there. I think if we broke it down, we'd see poultry first, pork second, beef and then lamb. But we're also seeing some good data around seafood that's outside of this report. And then fresh produce also continuing to drop a bit as well. So not lots of movement in the market. I think the consumer is fairly stable on what they're eating, but it's good just to get that view for a 5-year trend to help you understand where it is and what it's looking like. And then competitive landscape, we've talked through that, but just a nice pictorial view when you get the presentation so you can see. Woolworths the biggest, Coles, independents, and then it follows down through here. So where should you put your effort? But effort, I would say, isn't just about size. Effort is about best fit for your business, and I'm sure the person sat next to you, the best fit might not be the same as it is for you. Let's move on a little bit to liquor. Yeah, an $18.1 billion market in Australia. For 27 billion people, that's a little bit worrying, yeah? This is 2025 data, so there's 2,500 stores nationwide. Bearing in mind that it's very hard for a major retailer to sell alcohol. I know Aldi do in the market here, and I know Costco do, but you won't sell alcohol into Coles and Woolworths directly. The biggest player in the market is Dan Murphy's, a long-established brand. Is owned by Endeavour Group, used to be owned by Woolworths, but now a separate group in its own right. It's only got 285 warehouses, and it's doing 10 billion, but they won't be beaten on price. They do come with some complexities of supply, but the advantage that they have, is it's a warehouse format, so you're not necessarily getting tied up in the same restraints around product listing and range review calendars, because it's a lot more fluid. But 10 billion, that's nearly 50% of the market, well, it's over 50% of the alcohol market here at retail. And then you've got Liquorland under the Coles banner, 2 billion as we talked about, 1,000 stores, a good offer, but a lot smaller format stores, all under one banner now. But you can look in and go, if I want to sell liquor into Australia, who's the right fit for me? Is it Dan Murphy's and why? Is it Liquorland and why? Or do I want to go into the independent sector, of which is obviously lots of those bottle shops around Sydney, and then you're probably going to end up going in through the Metcash ALM model, which is through a wholesaler, which is about 6 billion of the market in 1,200 stores. So good opportunities, a significant market. Consumer drinking habits are definitely changing. I think we're also seeing that trade down to trade up. I'm wanting a better quality drink when I want a drink, and a lesser alcohol drink when I don't necessarily need a drink. So that market is changing, but it continues to create opportunities. So key retail trends in the liquor space. I think we probably just covered most of this. Moderation is absolutely coming through. Consumers drinking less but wanting to drink better. Premium spirits is growing at 7% versus 2% in 2024. So hopefully that's of interest for some of you. Again, I want to drink less, but I want it to be really worth it, as opposed to just drinking something for the volume. So a real mind shift change. The ready-to-drink format, or the RTDs, 14% of the total alcohol now, with a forecast CAGR of 7%. So that, what can I get in a can? And we were talking earlier, you look at the Jim Beam in a Coke, the Jack Daniels and Coke, they've been around forever. But you look at some of the innovation now, the hard sodas that are coming to market, the wines, the cocktails, anything you can get into a can or a bottle is resonating really well with the community at the moment. And anything with a CAGR of 7% for the next 5 years has got to be interesting if you're in that space. Lower non-alcoholic options are rapidly growing. We've seen a significant improvement in quality of the lower non-alcoholic drinks. Done a lot of work in that space, and some have been appalling, but we're seeing better quality products coming through now. There's a significant price difference between the alcoholic version and the non-alcoholic version, so I think in today's climate that also gives it an extra boost for customers. But the thing that's really exciting there is if you've got a non-alcoholic product, so I use the right term, you can pitch out to Coles or Woolworths, because that's a new category they're building, because traditionally they've only had 4 or 5 products there and they've been there forever. The non-alcoholic products are expanding that, and you walk around now and you're beginning to see a nice category in that space. Still a long way away from what we're seeing overseas, but it's all new territory. And just as we saw with plant-based in Australia, as a category manager, you're thinking, how am I going to grow my sales? So you need to have more range, more choice, and different pricing architecture. So if you come and pitch to me something that's really great and it's non-alcoholic, I'm super interested, because that's where I'm getting my growth. So, I think the ability to take that into there, as opposed to going into the traditional liquor shops, which is still important, I think is exciting. And then sugar-free and fruit-flavoured variants. We're continuing to see a drop in sugar, which is great, but we're seeing some very adventurous cocktails, should we say, where they're bringing more fruit into products. I'm not the market for that, but we are seeing that younger market that's absolutely getting into that. And so if you've got something there that is very high in fruit, very colourful, very Instagrammable, shall I use that term, the audience is right for that now, yeah. And we should touch on food service as well. A rapidly evolving sector in the Australian market. We're seeing changes in ownerships, we're seeing acquisitions to improve the supply base. We're seeing a business that's doing nearly 104 billion, yeah, so 2/3 of the retail market, which is significant. It's got a CAGR forecast of 10.4 for the next 5 years. So we've talked about trading down to trade up, but the outlook for the food service sector still continues to be strong. If we break it down and say, what is food service really for this context? 38% of it's QSR type, so casual dining, fast food related. 62%-ish is around independence. And then the growth in cloud kitchens. So right at the beginning, we talked about the role of social media, and we've then talked about the role of food on demand. The growth of cloud kitchens creates a great opportunity, because they're looking for inputs of raw material, for ingredients that enable them to meet their growing demand. Yeah? And they want to be different, they want to be authentic, they want to have some great food that you can buy from additional QSR, because they need to be different in the market as well. So for that market to grow, be forecast to grow by over 30% by the end of 2029, I think is definitely worth looking at for those of you that are thinking B2B or ingredient strategy is where you want to be. So just on the food service there, major distributors, PFD, we've talked about during the Coles slide, during the Woolworths slide. Bidfood, another strong national footprint here, broad product range. Chilled and ambient, they're probably the second player in the market, international player by reputation, very strong. Countrywide food service, regional specialists that's demonstrating national growth ambitions. So there is choice for you as you look in. There are a number of, shall I say, one man with a van that is an important part of the landscape here in Australia, but there's some very professional big players as well, if you've got a product that you think meets their needs. But their needs will be slightly different as well, about how do you sell your product into them. In some cases you'll need to be at the trade show, in some cases you'll need to have your chefs cooking up product. So they're not all the same. So if you decide that that's the route that you want to go in, just like we've talked about retailers, you need to understand how do you win with them, as well as just selecting the one that's got the scale and the volume that you want. So what does it take to win in grocery? From a brand perspective, I think you need to have a very clear brand strategy. I think you need to look at it as who's a retail partner rather than a retail customer, because partnerships should give you longevity of sales. You need to have the robust supply chain to meet the requirements of that retailer, and you need to have a marketing plan, because you get in front of the retail buyer, they love your product, the margin's good, and they go, great, I need you to spend 12 or 14% of your cost of goods on my retail media, what would you like to buy? So you've got to have a plan there that relates to that store if you're going to go on a brand strategy. That's if you're going direct. If you're going through a distributor, it's a very different conversation, and I would suggest you need to then decide what do you do versus what does your distributor do to help your business grow. I think Australia is a very exciting market for grocery, but I think you've got to take a long-term view. Short-term optimization very rarely succeeds in this market. The retailers are looking for more professional suppliers, they're looking for strategic alignment and operational efficiencies, and you've got to be able to differentiate your product versus your competition. So just to go back to the commercial essentials, brand and differentiation is absolutely key. You know, being another Me Too, your only ticket to win there is price. If you've got something that's very different about you, a unique selling point or USP, and a clear point of difference, that's your territory, that's your reason to win. You've got to understand that in relation to the retailer, in relation to your target consumer, and that's got to be a key bit of who you are when your product's being pitched into them. In-country capability. For some of you that have got great products that can contain animal protein, you might need to look at a contract manufacturing strategy locally that says, here's my formulation, I want it done in this way so it affects my brand standards. I can ship my vegetable-based products in from overseas. We put the two together and I've got that expansive range that we need. So there are ways around biosecurity, and Australia is a great country for contract manufacturing because so much of it relies on that. But also it's about account management. It's not necessarily about opening a big office in Circular Quay so that you can send someone down to Melbourne once a week, but it's about having someone on the ground that can manage the retailer's expectations and protect your business, to make sure your stock levels are right, to make sure that any food safety issues you're handling, to make sure that your product looks of the right quality in store and it's on the shelf. So, having that in-country support is really important. Supply chain readiness, understanding how you're going to supply them. We'd all like to go direct into Coles, or we ship the 40-foot containers in and so forth. In reality, you're more likely to go into a 3PL or maybe a 4PL, so having local storage capability in Sydney or Melbourne is probably key for you, with the ability then to drop the products in as your orders come through. But sometimes people don't understand what the volume really looks like for this opportunity. So just wanted to share an example with you. We look at Walls and you get a listing into all the Walls, so 1,000 stores. We launch a product on Monday, so we want 2 cases of product into each store, because that's what goes on the shelves, one at the front, one at the back. That's their way of working smarter. Then as backup stock, they probably want 2 cases, maybe 4 cases. So you've gone from 2,000 to 6,000 now. In a distribution centre, they're probably going to want 4 weeks coverage. So you multiply that up, you're near 10,000 cases. And then because you're exporting into Australia, you're going to be holding stock in this market. So very quickly, you could get 20 or 30,000 cases that you've got in your supply chain from shelf all the way back to your 3PL. So, it's about understanding that, because some of you actually supplying into Harris Farms with 50 stores might be the answer, because it's a lot more compatible for your supply chain. So, the rewards for big volume is great, the complexities and the risk of big volume is significant. So it's that balance really. And then the market investment we touched on earlier. The supermarkets now, you're seeing the decals on the floor, you're seeing all the stuff coming off of the shelves, you're seeing every time you go on the website what products are popping up first. The retail media machine has become a key tool for helping consumers find your products, but it's definitely a sales generator for the retailers. And I would encourage you that if you get asked to spend money on those things that you can measure the return on investment, as opposed to give them money because they ask for money. Because some of those tools are fantastic, and I think you've got to go in there with the mind, which are the right ones for my business that help me connect with customers and I can measure progress, as opposed to, well, I gave them the money and I really don't know whether it worked or not yet. Some people are doing that really smart now, so I think it's making your investment work for you. So I wanted to touch on own brand supply and what retailers expect, because what I'd encourage you to think about is, if you've got your own food manufacturing or drink manufacturing business at the moment, building your brand, the ability to offer a similar type of product that's clearly differentiated between your brand and private label can give you access to great volume. We've already talked at length about how Coles and Walls are growing their own brand strategy. They will be looking for suppliers that have got different capability, access to different innovation and so forth. So looking at it as if I introduce my brand to Coles, that's where my brand is. But at the same time, if I offer a slightly different version into private label because they haven't got one, then you're driving efficiencies into your factory, then you're driving a stronger reason for why I need to trade with you, because I'm getting 2 things from you. Likewise, you're getting 2 things from me. But coming in with that view that it could be a dual win, as opposed to all about brand or all about private label, I think gives you a different view. But what do I need for that? So you need internationally recognised food safety standards. You need a proven supply chain and operational capabilities, and you need the ability to meet the retail requirements. Yeah? And I'm sure some of you in the room, you've got some of the best retailers in the world back in Japan. I'm sure some of you are supplying those retailers now. And if you came to pitch to me and said, by the way, I'm supplying into these back in China, that gives into Japan, that gives you a real higher level of confidence in your competition. So use the tools that you've got, because that helps differentiate you versus who's coming in after you. And then winning the relationship is about being direct and proactive engagement with the retailers at both buying and technical levels. The buyers are definitely the leaders, but technical has a very strong influence over here. It's about that clear, unique selling point that delivers commercial benefits to the retailer's range, ultimately trying to deliver on some of their corporate responsibility commitments. And it's an understanding of their own brand strategy so that you can align your offer with that. So to come in with a value play, if they're really focused on premium, you're not going to be very successful. Vice versa, you come in and talk all about premium and they're focused on value, you're not going to be successful. So understand what the product category looks like, where there's a gap at the moment, where you could create value. I think it just gives you a chance to double your success. Just winning in food service, a brand strategy in food service is really important. We do know that the food service sector is asking for products by brand based on quality and confidence it gives them. So having a brand with confidence in that space, most of the time is important, sometimes not, but I would say most of the time. In-country sales function to make sure that the food service is really working for you is, in my view, really important also. And having the right distribution partner there that's got the credibility and the reach to get you where you want to be. And as always, food safety is becoming more important. Accreditations are becoming as important to the food service sector now as they were in the retail sector. So the standards are raising, but for those of you that are experienced in that space, it does give a good opportunity. And there's no reason you can't do both. You know, you can be successful in retail and successful in food service. If you've got something that's really innovative, sometimes going in through food service first to help consumers become aware of the trend and then drop into retail can be a really great strategy, and sometimes a lower cost strategy. So we're nearly there on the slides and we're into the questions, yeah? So winning in B2B, core requirements, having a clear strategy and a long-term commitment to the market. The ability to phone up and say, I've got 100 tons I just need to clear, I won't be here next week, I just need to clear the stock. I think those days are still there in some cases, but it's a lot more about long-term supply and working together to unlock value. It's about that reliability of supply chain. We're seeing again at the moment stuff coming out of Europe is being impacted, so it gives you a strength, the fact that you're reasonably local to Australia and you've got a good reputation for supply chain into the country. So it's not just about price anymore, it's about, we were taught a lesson that having the best price and no availability was not the best price. It's the best price and the best availability. And I think if you can demonstrate you've got a robust supply chain and be competitive, I think that opens doors for you. The direct sales model or credible in-market distribution. Some of you will be looking at it, how do you go direct, where you've got the big volumes, makes lots of sense. And some of you will be saying, how do I partner with in-country specialists that can grow my business there? Accreditations and sustainability compliance we've touched on, but again, there's no easy route in now. The standards are pretty consistent. And then the target segments we've touched on, so the cloud kitchens, commercial kitchens, hospitality. We've got 3 major hospitality players here in the market, which operate across the prisons, the institutions, the mines, etc., which become very interesting. One conversation to reach so many potential consumers. We've got the growth in Japanese-inspired QSRs, and you're lucky. You've got some really well-established key importers already, some of which I know are here today. So just wanted to touch on the regulatory compliance, because people come to us and go, love to supply Australia, but it's too complicated. I don't think it's overly complicated, I just think it's different. So we've broken it down into 4 areas for you. Biosecurity, so what are you allowed to bring into the country? Yeah, so we know proteins challenged, we know vegetables in certain states are challenged, certain formats I should say. But there's good government tools to be able to check that and see, okay, what can I bring into the country? So doing the pre-work up front, before you engage someone that's going to go and talk to us, you're going to come and do the market analysis, can I get my product into the country? And if I can, then does a co-manufacturing strategy work for me? And there's a BICON system there that you can tap it all in and it gives you the yes or no. Import documentation then, which is monitored or measured, enforced by a different department, DAF, Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. That's required as the products come into the country. So yes, I'm allowed to bring it in, but I need the documentation to make sure I can bring it in, is generally how that framework works. Then the food safety requirements. And it's surprising how many people have a product either in Australia and they want to export, or they want to export into Australia where the ingredients are not permitted, or the ingredients are not permitted at that same dosage as we would consume them in other markets, particularly as we get into that novel ingredient space. So understanding, is my product allowed to be imported, not from a biosecurity perspective, but from an ingredients perspective, and the two are very different. And then retail labelling, for those of you that have got a brand and you want to put it straight into retail. Country of origin labelling, compliance in the event of a food safety event where you've got to have a phone number and a contact in the country that can be contacted through key working times and so forth. Full list of ingredients and the allergen requirements here might be slightly different to what you're used to in other markets. But 4 headings there that I would say you have a work stream that takes you through each of those, to make sure that you can set yourself up for success. With the complexities of bringing product in, there's lots of licensed customer brokers. Sometimes engaging one of them, at least for the first run, helps you learn and understand what you need, because as we've seen with some products, you get them stuck at the port, it's very, very hard to get them out. It just becomes too difficult. So doing the preparation, getting the right partner to help you bring the product in, and ultimately the benefit you're getting there by bringing the right experience to the table is that your commitment to the retailer to have products on the shelf next Thursday, because that's your range review date, you meet it. Because if you phone up and say, well, I've got 4 containers in at Melbourne, but they're all held up by biosecurity checks, you very quickly lose your traction with the buyer, and that opportunity goes. So it's about saying, not only have I got the right products for the market, and I understand who my target consumer is, and I've got all the commercial pieces lined up, but I can handle the compliance piece that enables me to get the product through. So you shouldn't be daunted, but it's just slightly different, and you've just got to spend time to understand it. And there's obviously the role there for in-market food consultants as well, advising on the food safety and the labelling. So I just wanted to share some of the trends that are driving growth. Now this could have been 100 slides, but I just wanted to share some as an example. So we're seeing the focus on health and beauty, yeah? That's moving on more and more, and the level of innovation in that space continues to impress. But health and beauty is really important in this market, as it is with others. And I think it's that little bit of time for me to recover before I go out and face the world. So, we're definitely seeing that grow across the male and female community, yeah? We're then seeing food with added benefits. So high protein has been around for ages. We're now seeing low carb and high fibre also coming in. But we're also now seeing collagen coming into food. So Australians understand protein, driven by the growth of the Chobani yogurt that arrived here. They've also got a better understanding of fibre because of their awareness of good mental health and good gut health. But they really understand collagen as well. So we're seeing more food now that's got one of those in, or even all 3 of those in. So if you I should probably put this in my other words, product from Japan, I think you do some great products with collagen in. Yeah, and I think you've got some great innovation there that we're not seeing here. So if you look at what's different, building on that trend with something else with collagen in, I think it's super exciting, yeah. And then we touched on the independent sector earlier. Harris Farms, 52 stores, they said they're moving into private label supply now. So for those of you that are looking for a smaller minimum order quantity, because you want to get a little bit more efficient, maybe you want to fill a container that's coming in with what you're selling into the independent sector, an opportunity to offer someone like Harris Farms some private label option starts to help you fill the containers. And protein, as we talked about, so the ready meals across frozen and fresh, very, very strong in this market at the moment. High protein in there continues to dominate. You've got the ice cream then, which is low sugar or no added sugar. That continues to be strong. And then the area on the end, which I find really exciting, is this healthier snacking. So we're now seeing things that we're using to snack on that we wouldn't have done previously. We're seeing the growth in the dried meats, we're seeing the growth in the dried vegetables, the pickled vegetables and so forth. So really understanding what else is in that market, what else have we got that's very natural in our culture that isn't available in this market, because we're all looking for something that isn't a packet of crisp. Yeah? So I think that's a super exciting space. And then I just wanted to share a couple of examples, and apologies, the top's been cut off here, but a couple of examples of what's growing internationally that we're not seeing here yet. So on the left, you've got a Marks and Spencer's product, and why that's important is that's about brain health. So they're using the lion mane mushrooms and so on and so forth. But this is now how we look at food differently. That I've had the protein because I've been to the gym, or I've had the collagen because I'm feeling that my skin's not looking great. This is about looking after your brain health. So we're seeing that reflected in food in a big way overseas. There's only a little bit of that here, but I think that will be a growth area over the next 12 to 18 months. And it will either be local supplier capability, or it will be sourced from internationally where it's proven products in that space. But a greater understanding away from traditional nutrition to different parts or elements of your body, and that's super exciting. And it's a regular product. With that one, you have one shot in the morning, one shot in the evening. So you send them two a day. It's about that longevity, not just I've been to the gym so I have one, it becomes life cycle, which is really important. The next one to it then, similar build, healthy gut. So we're seeing the healthy sodas now with fibre in, and that's really coming into that carbonated drink space now quite strong, because people are saying, do I need to drink that with all that sugar in? Actually, here's something, no added sugar, less than 10 calories normally per can, and it's got the fibre, so it's good for me, prebiotics, probiotics. And then on the end, yes, it's only a box of cornflakes, they've been around forever, but what I wanted to call out with this slide, this is the movement that we're now seeing in other markets around how do we address the challenge on ultra-processed food. So there's only one ingredient in this cornflake, and it's a cornflake. Whereas if you pick up a box in the supermarket, it's probably 14 ingredients. So this isn't about bringing a cornflake into Australia. This is about saying, as consumers want more wholesome food and less processed foods, what can I deliver that's got less ingredients and ingredients that they're confident in and trust and so forth. And this movement will only grow, but we're not seeing that here yet. So please don't think I've told you 2 drinks and a box of cornflakes. It's what they represent that's key there. So clear framework for success, just coming into the end now. Understand the market, understand your supply chain, consider in-country representation, because if not, you win the business, you fly overseas, and then how does your business grow in the way you want? Understand the retailer strategies. They're all online now, they're really easy to get. There's regular updates to shareholders on what are they doing, what are they achieving, how does your business bolt into that, how do you connect with customers, and how do you use the tools that the retailers are giving you. If you've got a great product now that inspires me as a buyer, snap your hand off, but I want to know what's coming next. So what's your innovation pipeline behind it? Once you're in, how do you stay relevant? Your product differentiation and your unique selling point. You think about how many other products are on that shelf. What's your reason to win and get on there? But at the same time, think about your marketing strategy. You need to be margin accretive, so you need to help you make more money, and you need to think about how you're going to fund some of that marketing in store through promotional activity. The retailer won't give you a plan, they give you an expectation that you should have a plan. So it's forward thinking to say, this is how I want to do it. And I think you get a good insight for that by understanding the category in store. So talking to a client earlier in the week doing ice cream, they want to do 25% off every one week every month. Look at the category, it's 30% off, so 25% doesn't resonate. So you've got to understand the category so you can speak the same language. Or if you don't want to follow the category average, have a good reason why, as opposed to be caught off guard, because I thought 25 was a good number. Trading to win, we've done the volume example a little bit earlier, so we can move through that, if that's okay. Trends driving growth, we've just talked about that through the slides, so we can probably move through that in the nature of time. Growth opportunities, if I look in at the market, I think non-alcoholic beverages are really strong from a growth opportunity, both into retail and into convenience or bottle shops. Ready to drink formats in alcohol, lower levels of alcohol, as we've touched on, is very strong. Anything that is wellness driven, anything that's got a snack and it's got a wellness attribute, I think is really popular in this market as well. But I think also the overarching trend in there is our love for authentic food, and I think that's where you can be the strongest. Market in motion, the consumer is constantly changing, the regulatory framework is fairly steady, but you need to be aware of changes. Retailer consolidation, I think we're fairly steady in that space at the moment, but digital acceleration is going to be really key moving forward. The important thing is to continue to understand the market, because it is changing, and your connectivity with that market will determine your success. Trade down to trade up, I think we've touched on that with the examples earlier, so happy to move through that. Own brand, if we look at Aldi, 90%, Woolworths about 32%, Coles about 33%, slightly ahead as we said. Independent sector, if you're looking in at that own brand supply, then it just gives you a feel for how important it is to their business and how they're trying to grow. I think, a couple of years' time, you'll see Coles and Woolworths probably about 45-46%. So there's still headway there for products, and I'm seeing products in store this morning that have only just landed that are new, and you can see where they're going to go next based on where other retailers are going. So there's still a lot of headway, and that creates lots of opportunities for you potentially as suppliers. Online channel, I think we touched on that, but some of you might just decide you want to come into this market and go through Amazon. Amazon have obviously got their new warehouses up and running now, so they've got the animal now to feed the demand. What we haven't seen so far is the animal really pumping in the way in which we've seen in other markets. So I think Amazon can be a low-cost strategy for some of you, and it's a good way of getting your product out there very quickly, or fill in that gap between you've pitched to a retailer and the range of you is not for 12 months, so I can get product through the supply chain now via Amazon. I think we've touched on that. Innovative strategies, start focus, be very clear what your purpose is, understand the competition in the category you're targeting, and then build and scale with confidence. And to summarise, key takeaways for market entry, I think it's a high potential market. I think it's concentrated and sophisticated, but you've got to understand it, But I don't think it's too big that it's hard to understand, because there's only 4 or 5 major players. The supply chains and compliance are fundamental to your success here, not just in regulatory compliance, but your ability to get product where you want to, when you want to, considering the challenges of scale and temperature. Know your channel before you start. Be really clear what you want to target, whether it's grocery, food service, even convenience, or B2B, because all the approaches are slightly different. Yeah, and it's about being very clear on who your brand is, what your unique selling point is, and with a long-term commitment, I think you can achieve great success in this market. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for Maxton. So
Take a breath,
please see the question.
Yeah.
So if you have some questions, I'll wait.
Good afternoon. My name is Shirahama from Ajinomoto. Nice to meet you. I have two questions. One question is regarding Aldi. I think it's a very interesting store that depending on the categories, the name of the brand is all different. Otherwise, in Coles and Woolworths, they use the same brand in every category. So I want to know if there's some specific reason for that.
Yeah, so the Aldi model until recently has been that they use a portfolio of brands, so all their brands, all listed to them, but the customer walks in and thinks you're buying local products. And in reality, if you turn it around on the back, it's all got the Aldi head office address. In the US, probably 6 weeks ago, where Aldi have seen phenomenal large growth, over recent years, they've now made the commitment that they will put Aldi's name on the products and move away from what we're seeing in this market. So I think it's historic, and whether we will see change in Australia potentially. But I think also in Coles and Woolworths now, Coles and Woolworths have probably got somewhere between 15 or 20 products that don't look to be there, or brands that don't look to be theirs until you turn it around. I was looking at Shine the other night, cleaning products, yeah? It's a Woolworths product, and then they go Shine Ultra. But you look at it and you think you're buying a new brand, because in this market, I think the level of consumer confidence for private label is growing, but it's still lower than other markets. So I think it's very much a trust issue here. So you said there was the second question?
Yes, second question. I think this is a difficult question, but when I see the shelves in Coles and Woolworths, there's a very extreme difference depending on the categories. Categories like protein snacks, there's many variants. But however, when you see dressings, there's only one player or two players with 3 or 4 items. So I wanted to know, even though the consumer is sophisticated, what are the buyers thought that they limit items by category, and suddenly, depending on the categories, there's many items like snacks and ice cream. When we go to the dessert and frozen food, most of it's ice cream, and there's for me, I think it's too much variance.
Yeah. No, that's a great observation. So we tend to go for a cycle, I would say. So if we look at the protein bars first, and I think there's lots of synergies there between plant-based foods when they launched in the market here probably 7 or 8 years ago. The buyer's looking to get as much choice out for the consumer as possible, because they don't know what's going to resonate with the consumer. So I don't know what's going to sell well, but I need to get choice, so I've got the depth of range. And then you get into another category such as the mayonnaises, yeah? And you look at that and it's a very tight range with brands, because we've got the data that now says these are the brands that Australians trust, so we don't need to limit the range. And you go through a cycle, and what I think we will see now is the protein category will restrict because there's too much choice, and there's a lot of products there you wouldn't buy again, but there's some great products in there. So now the consumer knows what they're going to buy, and should a brand loyalty. The retailer knows what's working, so they're going for a range rationalisation program here now. Coles has said that they're looking to take out 10% of their product lines over the next 18 months, and Woolworths haven't got a figure on it, but are looking to do similar. So you're taking away what doesn't work, which drives back to simplicity and efficiency for your supply chain. I think with the mayonnaises, now what you're starting to see is open up a bit more, because we're now seeing mayonnaises starting to carry flavour. So we're seeing the heat come through, we're seeing the sweetness come through, as opposed to traditional mayonnaises. So they will now open that up, and then they get to the point where they're bringing that back down and open it up. And I think that's a journey. Definitely happened in plant-based, and I think we're seeing it in other areas of the store now. Does that answer where you're going?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
presented last time, one company. And you might say that before, because I arrived lately, but so before entering the retail store, like we need to get people know about sake itself because it's good, and we need to get people to try to sake because if we enter in the retail but people not going to buy, it doesn't make sense. So what we want to try is reaching out restaurant or bar or something like these kind of like big things.
Yeah, I think there's an important piece about helping consumers understand your product, particularly if you're taking it into a new market. So we've got kombucha here. I'm sure you've seen the kombucha. So it's a fermented drink, but it had been around for a very long time. But one particular brand took it to the retailers, and they committed to helping Australian consumers understand what it was, why it was good for you. So they came with a product and they came with a plan, and now they're the market leader. So if you come to the retailer with it's a great product and here's our plan to help Australians understand it, that's great. If you come and go it's a great product but we're not sure Australians will understand it, it's unlikely to be successful in retail, so it struggles to get listed. So sometimes you might want to go for food service. So I think probably the short answer is you need a plan of how you're going to help consumers understand what makes it great. And if it's too expensive for you to go into retail, which it could be, then it's about having a plan that might use social media. You might do something here in Sydney, you might do something in Melbourne, and grow slowly, maybe into the independent sector until people go, wow, this is really exciting, and then you get the help into the retailer. But just to launch something that is new and exciting that the market doesn't understand is a really hard strategy.
If we want to know the consumers and we want to try to reach out try to know, understand what like what kind of rate is there. Like you said, social media is long term.
Yes, you can do customer testing. So there's lots of companies that will do customer testing for you, either by sharing the product or by sharing the product picture in the profile and the description. So you can do some of that to get some data on that. Or the other opportunity would be, an independent or maybe even a Costco and do it with sampling. If you're really confident in the product, go into some of the Costco stores or some of the independents and put a sampling program behind it. Sometimes that can be the most cost effective, but that's a slower way to grow. But if you can build that understanding, then you get that following, and then you start to become the next trend. Okay.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, we have let me see. Yeah, we have to end this kind of session. So thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for sharing the great knowledge with us. Thank you. Everyone to join us our seminar. Yeah, let me see. I think you questionnaire. So when you go, you get out the we would like you to submit it in the section. That would be appreciated if you share about your results. And let me see. Yeah, today we took several photos of this event. So I understand. I hope you understand that such a kind of picture will be, let me see, used for promotion or some article. Yep. Thank you so much. And Mark is available till 45, 4:45. So let me see. Yeah, you can exchange a business card till that time. And we have today we have let me see we have let me see the session. Let me see this the meeting with Mark. The DH Promise, Ajinomoto, Nippon Foods, Sushi Factory, Nishirei, and Maruto. Let me see. So I hope you let me see to visit this meeting room at the time. So thank you so much for everyone to coming to our seminar. And if you have any questions about the JETRO, please let us know. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Good. Yeah. 会社を大学生に言われためちゃくちゃノートめちゃ書いてました。ちょうだいっていやそれだと何分かそうですね。去年より大丈夫だよ。あ、そうですか。もう白い。そうか。続き去年の1月から。あ、じゃあ一気に。でもまだあ、そうですね。それだったらいいです。お会いしたことないですね。そうですね。独立して、独立したばかりまだ名刺ができてない。もう立ち上げてきたんで。前一緒にした時に挨拶だけして、そうなんですね。会社のではないです。何か宣言してつけてください。いや、それはこう世の中でネットワークが張り巡らされてます。離れた方がいいなって。買い物していただいて、新しい会社。
アカウント開けて、そうそうそう。信頼な。アンコいただいてて、個別に。5時15分。
肌見で思ってた、一回ちょっとこれしてみようかな。一回そのね、あれいらんかった。すごいいいなと思いつつ悲しくなった。ね、こういうね、なんかそう。それ読み込むのに私はいろいろこうこれ読んでる人いないと思う。まあはっきり言ってるけどね。そんなことない。最初の何ページかサマリー。まあそれと最後。それでいろんな。 そうです。そうです、そうです。そうさんとさんが降りてるんですけど、もう一人強い方が我々は別の会社なんですけど、そう別ではない、いろいろ調査自体がなくて、私もちょっと上の名前12年後でなんか初めてでしてだからあれですよね、そのどっちかというとこうジェットの人とこの企業さんも我々が今やってることとして、それこそ関西さんとやってはしてきますので、それ以外のことを延長をもうちょっと広げたいかなと。我々ができることは、どうしてもやっぱサプライからさんがデリバリーができるけど、それを本当にマーケットに普及するって言ったら難しいから、それこそ我々がレストランに行って、これをすぐ欲しいとかとか、それこそイベント、大きなイベントして、最近も日本の居酒屋で、獺祭の価格開きを作って、ちょっとそれをインフルエンサー誘ってみたいなことをやったりしてるんですけど、そういうと本当に実際に置くだけじゃなくて広げるっていうので、ちょっとマーケティングをしてみたり、おそらく企業さんリスナーの皆さんがいらっしゃると思うので、そういうことですね。情報誌なんですね。そうか、情報とか、限定で。それこそ皆さんから問い合わせをいただいて。
追加で入れることができる。
まあね、もちろん、筑田さんと力もあるかもしれないけど、今パッと別に案件によってなんか困ってるドリンク企業さんいらっしゃる企業さんがこっちに向けてきたり何がネックで卸に入れる前にやっぱり市場への認知が必要だと私は思ってだからレストランとかセクションに入ってちょっとまだ早いなって思ってたんですけど、まあ、行ってもいいよみたいな話だったので、ちょっとその路線もありかなと思ってなんかその実際にそうですよなんか卸からとはつながらなかったけど次の一歩として我々って聞きたいのもせてあるんですね。そう変わる。そう本当にすっごい手触りあることをやってる本当にではいみたいな。そういうことやってるんで、一応歓迎に大切に話あったんですけど、ビアセットにしてもらって、リストリベートして、そういうのすみません、何も用意してください。ですね、獺祭を代表してるロゴみたいな。そうなんかスターバックスのわかんないですけど。金とあれが60金好きなんで。
転職検討して 時に多分抑えたと思う。
そうですか。
そうですね。
ウィアードのやつ
ですよね。はいはい。いらっしゃいます。お元気そうでお久しぶりです。そうですね。またお会いできて。あ、そうなんですか。今は
何十年ぶりか。
まあそうです。こ
れ同じ会社なんですよ。
役所もそうです。
のことでしたよね。
いらしたら、
はい。
日本ですね。はい。
それと以外にお会いしたこと
はい、そうですね。私実はブリスベンに10年ほど行ってて、戻ってたんですよ。はい。ブリスベンにしてるんですか。はい。よろ
しくお願いします。
そうですね。親会社が魚シートになります。お酒とか。
知ってます知ってます。みりんとか。
そうですね。
はい。でお店とか何か買い取ったかっていう話を昔
いやゴルフで多分。こういう店舗はないんですが、こういう店舗は日本で直したりします。
そうですか。そしたら横断とかはできないけど、例えば東京マートさんとかそういったところで。
東京マートは別の会社になるんですけど、はい、うち主にレストラン、新井さんのスーパーさん。はい、そうですね。
スーパーっていうのは日本のスーパーじゃなくて、
例えばアジア系とか。
いっぱいありますよね。
そうですね。まあ、ジュースピックとかやってる。人は同じ業界で。
コンピューターみたいな。
そうですね。
お肉の
セブンイレブンになっちゃったし。
あれを日本に出して 50%
ね、ですよね。そうだな、メニューおにぎり。おにぎりとか具が入ってるって聞いたんですけど。
まだそうですね。はい、寿司飯ですね。
そうっていうのはこう日本で使ってる保存対策とか何かが使えないみたいな状況で、それで
まだおにぎりっていうコンセプトが定着してないので、まああれは多分寿司って認識してるんで。
かなりでおにぎり定着してますよ。
それこそ今
そうおにぎり屋さん。
本当ですね。江口さんにそれを待ってるという電話って安くないとやらないと思う。
だからすごいですよ。ちなみに去年スペインポルトガルに行ったんですけど、おにぎり屋さんありましたもん。スペインとポルトガル。そう今ねちゃんとおにぎりっていうのがあって、ポスターもおにぎり屋に行きました。それで面白いからちょっと見てほとんど黒いおにぎりが出たら、あれだとイカスミかなと思ったの。そしたらなんか 絶対このイカスミのおにぎり違いない。これはもう違いないと思うんですが、パスタ。そう。これでもかみたいな感じで。だから乾いた粉じゃなくて、多分中華か何かのねっとり系のあれでご飯。そう。多分そうだと思います。そう。みたいな感じで、イカスミおにぎり食べちゃうみたいな感じでなんですけど。そんな感じじゃなかったです。
もう会社でますよ。市場的には海外ですね。
なんかオーストラリアの和牛おにぎりですよ。友達が食べてたんですけど、15ドル。一つ15ドル。いや、大きさは変わらないんですよ。上に焼いたばかりの和牛が。15分で2つ種類があって、和牛と明太子かなんかです。
相手のことにリスクフードであれば取らなきゃいけない。
それ以外は
私も25年やってますから。だからこっちはエビとか
そうね、普通の
エビとサーモンと
セブンイレブンのおにぎりも
他はちょっと難しい。
エビと肉をやってるんですけど。
だから中身にあれして、
まあ輸入はね。
種類があるんですけど、すごいちっちゃいお店で座るところがない。
とか別にもう
だからそのぐらい流行ってる。
みんなオーストラリアで熟知してる。
こじんまりしたもう
知らない人間はいないと。
タラハチとか知ってます？タラハチの半分ぐらい。
かなりコンパクト。あそこもね、別に産業者じゃない。
そう。だからもういや違う、4分の1ぐらいかな。だって5人ぐらいしか座れないんだもん。テイクアウトがメイン。テイクアウトがメインだと思うんですけど、だけど人がね、だからみんな外に行ってなんかその辺の道端とか。で作ってると思いますよ。もう一応できたやつが並んでるんで、サリーヒルとかなんかちょっとおにぎり食べて
なんとか回数
まあ味ではあったけど、なんかコストパフォーマンスがないなっていうのをその和牛だと本当に美味しいなみたいな感じで。
同じロットでメルボルンの
そう。
あれのネギと比べちゃうとですよね。
そうですよね。中に入ってるのってちょっと違ったり、やっぱりね、明太子とかなんかね、それらしいものはちょっと違うじゃないですか。
いや、そうですよね。10年後に戻ってきた。こちらで現在より。JCCI の方では
JCCI のゴルフがちょっと
局内の配送とかもしてるんで、
そうですか。そしたらあれとかやったら
一例に見分けてます。
外部整理とかスタッフする年末の。
棚卸し。
はい。
一例さんには
そうですか。
何回か出ますけど、もうちょっと先に。なんか税がですね。大昔ですね。そうですね。もう私ほとんどもう
食べられました。
使わないんで。もしかしてね、でも商社さんが私自身もともとスタッフさんですか。そうです。大昔ね。ゆる娘さんが。
そうです。
すごい覚えてらっしゃいますね。
私が日輪に入ったのはスタッフゆる娘さんから紹介を受けたんですよ。25年前。
そうですか。私まだいないです。
いや分からない。僕だったらもう30年前来て。他の仕事
ストックセークで。そう。
5年後に
そうライフストックが2本できるんじゃない。結局見つからなかったと思うんだけど、どこに行っちゃったんでしょうね。和牛のあれで食べられちゃったのかもしれないしみたいな。
いろんなことが考えられますね。と思うんですけど、
どれもよくわからないみたいな感じで。
一生の初めてです。そんなの初めてです。だから日例これ4社目です。
だからどういうふうになったのかちょっと私も覚えてないんですけど。
それがスタッフのサービス。
私も日本にいた時保健所にいたんで。
足向けてね。 寝れないように寝ないようにいつもしてるんですよ。いや本当です。
道路で牛引いちゃったとか、それでなんか
日本でも25年経って今も続けてますから。
素晴らしい紹介だった。
25年だから足
セカンドティアの中堅の会計事務所です。そうですね。
じゃあ今はですね、もとも
とPPG とか言い場にいたんですけど、
もう自分で
そこで長年やってて、なんかどちらかというと個人ベースのことが結構多くて、それであとビッグホームが
そうですね。ちょっとね
10年ぐらい前に
連絡させていただいてちょっと
会計事務所になったんですよ。
でももうそれも10
だから10年前に日本自治体でスタートして、今は12時台ですね。
それで以前監査とかで、
そうですね。KPMG とか言われてもいたんで。
リクルートさんじゃないですか。リクルートさんの競合なんですかね。
ご本社が京都ですよね。
そうですね。
京都の会社嬉しいな。よかったですね。
ゆるずめさんにお会い感謝してる人がいますから。
リタイアした全然残ってないです。そうですね。長く適当にそんな今日明日に需要が出るようなことじゃないと思いますので、需要があるのはこちらの方から。
今ありますか？
常に探してて、特に物流の方はもう取り扱える倉庫とか配送とかですかね。
それはカジュアルでやってますか？それとも
自分でやる。自分で今やってるけど、フルタイムの方が多いですからね。
じゃあローカルの方とか日本人の方とかそういうの関係ないんですか？
オフィスだとローカルの方も何名か働いてますね。多くはないんですけど、でもこれから増えていくので、
そうですね。実は当番がやってるんですよ。
そうですか。
女性の利者15%から2割引きだから。
人柄で多分いい額だったら。
今度一緒にお伺いしますか。そうですね。
はい。
外も見たいし。
そうですね。前アレキサンドリアだったんですけど、手狭になって少し減って、7800円ぐらいですね。
つながってて、
フォークリフトドライバーの方が
結構おります。はい。
回されてないんですか？
今制度自体
はい。
了解です。
メールもさせていただきます。はい。失礼します。
いや、あれで持ってきてる。展示会用で。で、その会社を、だから売れないんだよ、売れないって言って、言っちゃダメですよ。どう聞きますか。
どうした？
途中でちょっと休憩をして。途中から意識が戻って。
大変です。集中力が。
そうですよね。
結構。
情報の事務所勉強会みたいな。
結構情報量本当にいっぱいインプットされて。
そうですよね。
全然関係ねえよ。名刺がなかったんで。メッセージのことだとよくわかんない。難しいこと言ってる。考えたことない。
お酒のところはしっかりメモ取って
報告していいですね。
お酒のチャンスみたいですよ。
お酒売ってるんで、お酒の話するとスイッチが入ってやっぱり最近飲んでないらしいね。
時代はノンアルみたいですね。
外したから危ないです。日本からすぐ人来ちゃうんです。
どれだって
一緒に営業しましょう。
なんか真面目だね。お米と件で連絡してクイーンズあるの。女性の人だったな。女性者の格好ちゃんです。 なんかチャニーさんな、
ジェニー
そうそうそう。だったらどう？なくなったら上司が使わってないから。俺がシーロと話すからいいよ。これ使えっていうかそれもまた売ればいいじゃんって。
大概用意してくれるから、私たち持ってくだけなんで。
シーロに話すからうるせえからこれ使え。
きちんとされてるんですか。
すごいきちっとしてます。
すいません、きちっとしてなくて。うちがきちっとして。
在庫管理してくれるんじゃないですか。
大事です。ちゃんとしてもらわないとね、きちっとしてる人は大事です。会社のだけどね、俺このキャッチボールすごい楽だなと思ってるね。うちはほら物理がないから。